Judd, let's go around the National Hockey League a little bit, and I don't want to channel Agent Alan Walsh here when I say this, but just as an observer, I didn't love how the New York Rangers treated the Jacob Trouba situation. The Rangers and Trouba, in the course of contract negotiations, negotiated a no trade clause. Over the summer, there was talk that they'd like to deal him. He said, I'm going to invoke my no trade clause, which they negotiated. I don't want to go anywhere. My family doesn't want to go anywhere. I'm not going to approve a trade. Well, as the season goes on, the Rangers have problems. Chris Drury's trying to figure out how does he fix things here. And he wants to trade Jacob Trouba, their captain. And oh, by the way, the third consecutive team captain to be traded by the Rangers during the season. So they go to Trouba and they say, you either approve the trade or we're going to put you on waivers. And whoever picks you is where you're going to go. You don't have a choice here. That feels a little bit like circumventing the bylaws of the National Hockey League to me.
So, Dale, I think 2 points. I think first and foremost, I think you and Alan Walsh have it right that Chris Drury could have handled this a lot better. And I think that what you're seeing from the Rangers in the big picture, and this also goes back to the way that they've handled Barclay Goodrow, and they told him an hour beforehand this was a guy that they had signed to a multi-year deal. You're going on waivers, and off to San Jose he went. That I think the way Chris Drury has dealt with the Goodrow situation, the Trouba situation, Chris Kreider's name was put out there publicly. Why did you have to put Chris Kreider's name out there? This is going to be a guy, his number is going to be hanging in the rafters. Why is that out there publicly? I think that what you're seeing and the way that Chris Drury has dealt with his team and dealt with his players has manifested itself on the ice. However, to your point about Alan Walsh talking about circumventing the salary cap, and we had this conversation earlier. My dad was a lawyer. My wife's a lawyer. These, unfortunately, are things that you negotiate. So there are two different things in the National Hockey League. There's a no trade clause, and there's a no move clause. And the no
All right,
move
explain
means,
the difference for people who don't know.
okay, so this is the difference. No trade is pretty emblematic. I can't trade you to X number of teams. Some guys have a full no trade. Some guys have a limited no trade where you can trade them to 15 teams or 5 teams, whatever the case may be. For a no move clause, that means not only can you not trade me, but you can't waive me. And there are two different contracts that are given out around the National Hockey League. And that's why you pay guys like Alan Walsh to negotiate these things on your behalf. Now, maybe I don't know why guys choose, like if it were me, I want the no move clause every time because GMs can do this. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with what Jacob Trouba did. He negotiated, he worked hard to earn himself this contract and the provisions that are in it. So as a result, I don't have to take a trade to a place that I don't want to go to. I negotiated that with you. So in that sense, I understand where Alan is coming from, but this is what you negotiated, and these are the two differences between the clauses. But the other thing I want to go back to, since we're talking about Chris Drury, so this is the second time Jacob Trouba was going to be moving teams. He wanted out of Winnipeg, the team that originally drafted him. It was well known he was not going to sign, but the general manager there didn't threaten him with waivers. He decided, not only did he decide to move him, but he moved him to a place where his wife, who's a doctor and wanted to study, where she could pursue what she needed and what he wanted. He put him in that place. And the Rangers, they sent him a first-round pick and Neil Pionk, that first-round pick you saw last night in Ville Heinola. But the general manager there didn't cause such a stir that it completely undermined his team. I can't say the same for Chris Drury. I know that we say it all the time. Great game, lousy business. But I wonder to myself, Dale, and I don't know how you feel, Was there a better way for Chris Drury to handle that with the people that are involved, understanding how that it would be received in the room?
I mentioned that the Rangers have now traded 3 consecutive team captains during the season. First of all, I wonder about their decision-making process in deciding who to put the C on. But second of all, you come to the other, perhaps more difficult question: do I take the C off of a guy who I think is being affected by all of these rumors or stories about whether I'm going to move him or not?
That's never fun, and we've seen that around the National
Oof.
Hockey League with a number of teams. We just came from Winnipeg, and the Jets had to do that with Blake Wheeler, and that was sort of an awkward
Yep.
situation before they ultimately parted with him. But I loved Truma's comments after the trade. I think, just to paraphrase, he said it's a rite of passage to be fired at MSG.
Happens to the best of them, I guess. Talking about nightmare seasons, and there are a bunch of teams who are probably not performing to the levels they would expect, and the Bruins would candidly admit that they're one of those. But there's nothing going on in Boston like is going on in Nashville right now. The Predators have now got an 8-game losing streak, and it doesn't look like anything's going to happen to change it.
Oh boy, Dale. So the Bruins were down there early in the season. I think we referenced that. The Bruins, their first extended road trip, they went Colorado, Utah, Nashville, and I have a hard time explaining what's going on with the Nashville Predators, especially with the signings that they made during the offseason. But I go back, and since I'm thinking about this now, one of the things that Barry Trotz, I love Barry Trotz. His quote was, on July 1st, we're playing fantasy hockey. On October 1st, we're playing hockey for real. And just because you get these star players and bring them into your lineup, and I'm talking about Stamkos, Marchessault, and Shea, and this was already a really good team last year, a very competitive team, that doesn't automatically make everything better. And this is why, when I think free agency hits and we're approaching the trade deadline, and we can probably have this conversation later, everybody wants some star player. You want to bring that guy into your room, and you think, okay, the way he played there is going to be the way he plays here. And that's not always the case, because if you bring in said star player, let's take Steven Stamkos as an example. Well, how does that change everybody else's role on the team? How does that change the ice time that he's getting on the team? How does that change the voices in the room and how they're received? That's why a lot of teams are hesitant, is not the right word, but I think they think very closely about bringing in big personalities and star players at the trade deadline. If you think back, what was the big move that the Bruins made at the 2011 trade deadline? Do you remember who they brought in?
Yeah, it
Rich
was not what you'd
Peverly.
expect. And at the time, everybody in Boston was going, "Who?"
Rich Peverly. I know the big name was Thomas Caberlet, but Rich Peverly was the guy who made the difference. Those are the guys who I think in many ways, and you can point to so many different players, both forwards, defensemen, that have been brought in. It's not this big, highfalutin name. It's this one guy who really fits everything and makes your team go in a way that they didn't in the past. So, is that taking place in Nashville in the bigger picture? Maybe. Uh, they might be a better team next year, and it might take a full year to figure this whole thing out. And I'll be very interested to see how Barry Trotz handles this, and his guy Andrew Burnett behind the bench, who I really, really like.
Tuesday night, Nathan MacKinnon had a goal and 4 assists for 5 points. He reached the 600 career assist plateau in that game as well. This guy looks right now that if I was voting, I'd say he's the favorite to win his second straight Hart Trophy.
Oh, he's really good. And they've experienced so many massive losses early in the season. When the Bruins went out to play him early in the season, Dale, they were a shell. Yes, they had McKinnon and Rantanen and Makar, but then as you look down the roster, and we weren't doing the game, who are these guys?
Yeah.
And they changed out both of their goaltenders during the course of the year. You might see that at the end of a season, but I'd have to really go back and look and maybe ask the National Hockey League, when's the last time a team changed not one, but both of its goalies during the regular season? to see if they can get themselves back on track. I love Nathan MacKinnon and the will that he plays with. He not only does he bring the team into the battle, but he just brings the entire battle to the opponent. The way he plays, it's like watching a dragster on the ice. He and Connor McDavid are very different players, and both at the very top of the National Hockey League. But I love watching Nathan MacKinnon, and the way he plays, and how much I know Marcy likes to joke. I just love watching him get mad, and he gets mad all the time, every night, and you can see it on the ice.